So if you see that flash up on the screen, that's what's going to happen there. Feel free again, Savannah or anybody else on the call that might be listening in, you can throw something up on the chat or ask directly. I'll also throw into the chat, Jade and I developed what are the 5 most frequently asked questions. So that could be a great starting point if Sky and Savannah and anyone else, if you don't have any direct questions. These are really informative. Sorry to throw you off guard here, Keith, but here we go. There's nothing you don't already know. So if you two don't mind maybe answering some of those basic questions for us.
Keith, is there any place you want to
All right, sorry,
begin?
there they are. I'm looking in the chat.
Yep.
Do you want to start, Jade, or you want me to go?
I'll start. We'll do the first
You
one
start.
Of packing. That's always a very common question I get. And for me, I unfortunately made the same mistake twice. I overpacked for sure. And I think that is really common just because you want to make sure that you have everything. But my advice is there's always opportunity to go out and get things. You'll never be told no if you need to go to the store and buy toothpaste or deodorant or things like that. And they're going to tell you always the advice of pack your bag and then cut it in half. And I also recommend doing that as well. In regards to clothing, you can wear whatever you want around the base house and things like that. There's no strict dress code when it comes to that. However, I definitely recommend bringing more conservative items of clothing. Just out of respect, you will be in places where there are indigenous communities and more religious communities, and so you always want to be more covered when it comes to clothing. And by clothing like that's conservative, that's more cover your shoulders, cover your knees, things like that. So you're always good with a pair of basketball shorts and a t-shirt. If you want to be more dressy, you can wear flowy pants or something like that. But yeah, just always keep in mind that when you are on your time, on your semester, you will have chances to buy things. And a lot of my friends, they had to purchase another suitcase just because they didn't have enough room in the one they brought. So always keep that in mind.
So what should I pack? The packing list was great. And I would say you probably want half of what they tell you to bring. And to Jade's point, you can always buy stuff there, right? So not that you need to. Also, the places that at least Olivia went to Asia and Costa Rica, everything that she wanted to get there was less expensive in country than it is here in the United States. And so you can't make a mistake. But their packing list is really good. And I think, Jade, you're going through it again, right? Like you're going to kind of update it to continue to evolve it to make sure that it's even better. Are we going one at a time?
We could do it.
One question. All right. Why don't you go over accommodations since you stayed there and I didn't?
Okay. Accommodations, that definitely varies depending on which semester you're going to be doing. So there is obviously a difference between the campus semesters and the in-field semesters. Me personally, I did 2 field semesters, so I can only speak from that experience. But that changes pretty much weekly. You'll be staying in hotels, hostels, base houses, and Madeline has heard me make the joke before of base houses are very bachelor style. If you've ever seen that TV show, it's just a big house that you're sharing with all of your friends, and so that's super fun. And in regards to location-wise, that also will vary. So sometimes you'll be up in the mountains, and then the next week you'll be right in the center of a city. And that's really cool because you can see the variations of a country versus if you were to just go there with your parents or your friends or something, and you would typically see more of the same scenery. But that scenery is going to be switched week to week, and you get to meet completely different people, and you can see just how different culture is just 2 hours away in some countries. And that was probably the coolest part for me. You will be staying with your program leaders, and your teachers won't be far from you, and you'll always have a roommate, which is nice. you always have at least one roommate. Sometimes that number can change depending on where you are staying. Like hotels that can range from 2 to 4 to however many people they can hold. But with homestays, you also do homestays, which were my favorite part. You'll always have at least one roommate in your homestays.
Yeah, the only thing I would add is we heard that homestays were the favorite before we went. And my daughter was like, yeah, whatever. And then she went, and it was by far her favorite part. So there's something magical about the people that choose and are vetted through the process. Because she's still, I mean, she hasn't been in Asia for months and months, and she still talks about her ma that she had in Thailand. So it's a very cool part of the program.
The next question is, what was one of the biggest takeaways from the semester? For me, that list goes on and on. I can't just choose one. But for me, it was the people. The people that I met were absolutely incredible. My program leaders were incredible. The people in my cohort were incredible, and the local people as well. I think definitely I was at a spot in my life where I needed to give people a chance. I kind of had that unfair mentality of kind of all people were the same, and I just felt kind of trapped in that, and that's kind of what inspired me to travel and everything. And definitely going through Verdo, just the people that they staff and the people that they put you around are absolutely phenomenal, and I definitely needed that. And so my advice to kind of have that somewhat of a similar experience is to give everyone a chance, and to give all of the experiences you will be having a chance, to say yes to everything that is safe. Say yes to everything that is safe. That's the important part. And just kind of trust yourself and have a good time, because that's honestly when you just kind of learn to let go and live life the way that other people live it and not the way that you're used to, and kind of step out of that comfort zone. That is when you will have the most amazing experiences and the most candid experiences that will stick with you.
Yeah, the stuff that we noticed, I mean, one, my daughter is a very picky eater. I've heard Jade talk about that in the past. And then she ate like a century egg in Asia. I was like taking pictures of that, which still sounds terrible to me. She came back with how lucky she is. Like, you just see lots of different people and living in all kinds of different situations, but they're all happy. And so kind of a new appreciation for one, some of the things that maybe we take for granted in the United States, but more importantly, what can possibly make people happy. And none of the stuff that we have around is that. So that was pretty cool. The other point that I would make is like, her confidence is through the roof, and it's not like in a weird or arrogant way. It's just like she can handle anything. Her laptop broke in Asia. She had to go to a mall, talk to the woman at the Apple store. She sent home like funny texts because it took forever for her to realize that the lady's name wasn't Mac. But that's another story. And then one of the coolest things that happened in transition between the semesters is when everybody came home from college and was getting together over the holiday break. Like, the stories that she would tell, the way that I could overhear her talk to, parents, uncles, different family, and the jaw-dropping jealousy from her friends that went to traditional college that were like, wait a minute, this is what I'm doing and that's what you're doing. So it changed her in all like the right ways, but it also like clearly was the right decision, because you don't know, right? Like when you're taking this kind of leap of faith and trying travel first, and then it was just amazing to see how much it was, how different it was, and how much better it was.
The next one is, what is a typical day on a Verdo semester, and what does that look like? And I love that question, just because typical has to be used very loosely, because there really is no typical day. And that's kind of the most amazing part about it, is every day is different. But there is somewhat of a structure to it, just because they do want to prepare you for college and having that independence or whatever you choose to do in your future. And so a typical day would be you wake up, you eat, all of your meals are going to be around the same time. So you will have that type of stability, which me as a picky eater, food stability is very comforting for me. So it was good to have that schedule. That way I could kind of prepare in my mind what I was going to eat. And then in the morning typically is when you'll have classes. That can change just based on how it works with any activities or any schoolwork your teachers have planned, if that works better in the afternoon. But they do try to keep your classes around the same time, Monday through Friday, which is also really nice to have that type of consistency when it comes to academics. And then in the afternoon, after lunchtime, is when you will have your planned activity, and that's definitely where things will vary every day. One day you'll be ziplining, and then the next you'll be rafting, and then maybe skydiving. So that will change every day, but you will get notice ahead of time. They'll never just take you in a van and say, okay, we're going skydiving today. You'll definitely have a notice on that. And then on the weekends is when you will have more independence, I would say. There are still sometimes scheduled activities like museum tours and things like that, but that's when you'll have more independence to go shopping with a buddy or your friends. Or you can catch up on schoolwork. That's definitely very honed in, is how to balance all of those fun activities, but also remember that you are a student and you are taking classes, and to kind of prioritize those things and be able to say, I need to study this weekend and I'll go out next weekend.
I have a little bit to add to that as well as we start to transition to, unless Keith, did you have something else to add to that particular question?
The only thing I would add is that I tracked my daughter like crazy and watched where she was on Find Your Friends all over Asia. And it was very cool to kind of see. And so the typical day in a Virto parent for me was like waking up, seeing where she was, and like being just ridiculously jealous. But yeah, no, and then getting the weekly updates and everything.
That's awesome. That's good advice too. Maybe for some parents. Maybe we should keep that a secret for some students, but that's good. As we transition into this academic question about how are Virtual students supported when it comes to academics, I also wanted to add, someone's asked if we study every day. And then this question as well that came through to me about what academic skills do you think that you, that Jade or Liv, gained from the style of a Virtuo semester compared to the more traditional semester?
I'll take a shot at that. Only because of the two of us, I've gone through traditional college, Jade. You are, it's interesting because it's pretty immersive, right? And you're around a whole host of really different people. And, you know, just on the last trip, my daughter was with this kid who is just like fascinating and like plays Dungeons and Dragons online for money. Like people pay him to play with him. And he would like do these but he's done audiobooks, and like he's just like this super he's successful at that, right? Very different than my daughter. But so you get the perspective from him and the way that he was approaching whatever class it was, and his insight along with hers right next to each other, which is different than just going and sitting in a lecture. And so you probably don't learn the, like, how do I sit in a lecture? But you may have picked that up from high school, but you do learn how to participate in a team. You do learn how to participate in like group work, and how to kind of gather insight from your different peers, which is more applicable, I think, to work life than to kind of, again, just sitting in the back of a room and listening to a lecture. That was that part A and part B of that question.
Yeah, that was great, Keith. They were asking about the difference then, and then also how are they supported in their academics while on the semester?
So very, very well supported. So and Liv, you know, you get help with paper. I mean, they're there with you the whole time, right? So if you have questions or issues or any you know, it's no different than if you're at college and you can go to the library and check in with academic advising. So they are there very much to help you along the way. and her papers today are very different than the ones that she started with, 6-8 months ago.
And I think, Jade, if you went away on this as well, I think especially with this sort of what we get on the back end too, there are very few photos of the students sitting in class. There are a lot of photos of them having class, but that doesn't necessarily mean sitting at a desk. And most of the time they're conversational too. And Jade and I were just talking about this morning about having class in the pool and how that influences the rest of class. So Jade, how did you feel that you were supported by the Virto staff in terms of academics?
Definitely the support is endless. You will also see that once your semester is over, that your teachers and your program leaders are still there for you in whatever you need. While you are on your semester, they are there for you all the time. If you want to stay after class and you have a few questions, not a problem. If you want to come earlier, also not a problem. But also you are held accountable, which was really good, because if you do choose to continue on after Virto with your higher education and going to a more traditional college, you will need that skill of being held accountable for your work, because you are in charge of your own education in that way, of getting things in on time and studying for tests. But the cool thing is with such a small ratio of student to teacher, you get that one-on-one attention. And not only that, the teachers, they want to be there, and they are just as curious as the students are. And that's what was amazing to me, because in high school, I kind of just felt like we were told to memorize the material so that way we pass the test, and then after that test you can forget everything if that's what you want to do. And to me, that kind of took the joy out of learning. I used to love learning. I used to love school. But once I kind of started to realize that that's kind of how a lot of high schools operate, I kind of lost that joy. But I definitely got that back with Virto, just because the teachers, they take the time to learn how you learn. And so for me, I am much more hands-on, and I like to see how things interact in the real world in order to make that connection for information to stick with me. And that is not a problem when it comes to Virto. For example, we were taking a public health class while I was in the Dominican Republic. And then the next day we were touring a hospital, and we learned firsthand about the medical system there, and all the things that they want for their future and how they're going to get there and things like that. And so every day when you are learning, you go out and you see the things that you're learning about in your textbooks. And then you also have such amazing teachers who will do that extra research on that question you had that they didn't know how to answer, because they want to know too. They're just as curious as you are. And with academic accommodations, they are amazing with that. If you have any preset academic accommodations, you tell them, and there's the understanding that however much time you need to complete an assignment, you have, because not everybody learns the same in the same way, and not everybody learns at the same pace. And that's something extremely important, I think, to recognize. And that's kind of one of the common flaws in the education system, is kind of clumping together everybody as one type of learner when that's not the case. Also, if you don't have any preset academic accommodations, they understand all of the challenges that you're going through. Not only is it your first year of college, but you're in a foreign country and you're going through all of these different changes, and that's hard, and they understand that. So if you are having a super rough week and you're super homesick and you can't figure out a topic for your essay, you can always talk to them and say, can I have another day to do this? And that won't be a problem, because they want you to do the best that you can do. And they want you to see that pattern of you getting better, you increasing in your education. And they want that for you. And so they definitely support you in order to get there.
So I had a question. What classes did you take, just in a nutshell, what were the classes that you took on your trip? Is it the same that they have now?
Yeah, it was basically the same. I did sociology, environmental science, public health, things like that. There is a few differences between the campus semesters and the field semesters, so that will be different. But I took around the same courses as they are offering now.
Yeah. Did you take Spanish or any language?
I did not take Spanish. With Spanish, I knew close to nothing when I went to Latin America, and I thought that was kind of going to ruin my trip in a way, and I think not necessarily made it better, but it definitely wasn't a problem. I took Chinese in high school, so I was really lost. It didn't help me out at all. And so I was super concerned about that, but the program leaders, they all know Spanish, and everybody in the countries are super welcoming, and they know that you're trying. And so that's something that's super important, is to try to, whatever country you're going to, whether it be a Spanish speaking country or Italian or Fijian, it's definitely important to try to speak that language. You don't have to do it perfectly. Nobody is expecting you to do it perfectly. But just putting in kind of that extra effort is just showing that you care about their culture and, you want to connect with them.
Right.
I have a question that came down my pipeline here for Keith and Jade as well. If you could talk about one of the challenges that you experienced as a student or as a parent throughout the Verto experience, and how you overcame it. Or did you? I would hope so.
I'm struggling with challenges, and maybe it's because Asia is so far in the distant, hindsight's typically pretty rosy. And actually the time difference, like that was an easy place to go, but the fact is we were 12 hours apart, and so it was actually really easy to keep track, because like when we were waking up, she was going to bed. I think Liv would have told you that figuring out technology maybe was something in Asia, because there were firewalls, and like you had to use a VPN because they policed the internet, and trying to figure out some of that stuff was probably the earliest challenge for her. But she worked through it. I mean, the unfortunate most recent one is that she lives at home. And I'm kidding. She's actually been in and out of the room a couple of times as I've been sitting here. So I'll come up with one before the end.
Madeline, are you able to repeat? I'm sorry, it's storming here, so it's kind of noisy.
Yeah. So the question was, explain if you had a challenge that came to mind, and if or how you overcame that. Could be any challenge. I'm thinking for you, food and otherwise, but I know you have several that you've talked about in the past.
Yeah, there definitely are challenges, and I think that is something that is important to recognize. Whenever I talk to somebody about study abroad or as close as a program as possible to Verto is definitely unique in that there is really no one word to describe exactly what it is. Was that, they talk about how amazing it is, and you're going to have all this amazing food and meet all these amazing people. And that is 100% true. And I had the best experience of my life. But it is very important to acknowledge that there will be hard days and there will be challenges. As Madeline mentioned, for me, I don't know what I was expecting going into it, but food was definitely a challenge for me. My diet here in Ohio has always been buttered noodles and chicken nuggets. And so that's kind of my style of eating. I have the palate of a 5-year-old. And so going to a place like Latin America where food is such an important part of their culture, it definitely took a toll on me. And food is definitely something that is very important while you are away, because that's your main source of fuel and energy, and you need to have that nutrition. But for me, not having a McDonald's on every corner kind of threw me for a loop. But luckily I had amazing program leaders. I just actually wrote a blog about my chicken nugget story. One of my program leaders surprised me with a bag of chicken nuggets when I was having a super rough day. And that was amazing. But you kind of just have to be open-minded when it comes to these challenges and not be too hard on yourself, because I think that's where I went wrong. I got mad at myself because I was wondering, why am I crying over chicken nuggets? And it's not about the chicken nuggets. It's kind of just you're being hit with so many different new aspects of culture that you don't really realize, and that's totally okay. If you were taking a more traditional route, you would have challenges as well. You would be homesick. You would see your friends on Snapchat doing something and feel like you're missing out. And so, those challenges are going to pop up everywhere, but you really learn how strong you are, and it takes a certain type of person to do a program like this. And so you're already ready in that way. You just might not realize it yet.
Thank you both for that. I'm curious too, and please continue to add your questions to the chat or move them over to me privately if that works better for you. But I'm curious from a standpoint, I know, Keith, you had mentioned that hearing some of your other family members, and when Liv was explaining her experiences to some of the students who had gone the traditional campus route, kind of having some jealousy there, or kind of comparison. And I think that's something that a lot of students experience throughout the summer while they're preparing to go abroad, as well as comparing with students who are going on a traditional semester, and what does that all look like. So I was wondering what maybe advice you'd give to those students. And Jade, I'm also curious if you've experienced that on your end. That's not something we've talked about before, with other students wanting to know more about your experience and kind of relating to your peers on that level.
So I just want to clarify, are you saying that the person going on a Verto trip might be jealous of somebody going to traditional college?
I think that happens at the beginning, and then the reverse happens
I agree.
at the end.
All right, I agree with you, but I just wanted to make sure.
Yeah, thank you for clarifying.
It's always difficult to go the road less traveled, right? Like it always seems like a little bit different. And you also, I mean, Hollywood and television and everything has kind of put college up on this crazy pedestal. And you think it's going to be this, amazing thing. And then you get there and it's just a bunch of kids that don't know each other yet, trying to figure out how to go to school and like live together. And that takes a lot of bumper cars and fighting through things. And a lot of the same stuff, Jade, you were just talking about happens in the traditional freshman year too, but not in Latin America or in Asia or in Italy or wherever it is that you decide to go. So I think, the good news is once you sign up, and like, that's the course that you're going on. You just have to have faith that that first conversation you have when you get back, even via FaceTime or whatever with some of your friends that are in, they're having trouble with their roommates or whatever the case might be, that it starts to shift back in your direction really, really quickly as far as like the envy scale, which is something that we should all be able to step away from. But it is, you just need to be confident that getting to travel the world, like, you're never going to have another chance to do that.
For me, it was definitely interesting because that was one of my fears when I didn't choose the traditional college route, was kind of that FOMO, that fear of missing out. And, there were a lot of times on my semester where I did have to put down my phone and not look at Snapchat. But you have to realize also that this is 1 year and you have 1 semester, 2 semesters to really make the most out of it. And then, you will have X amount of years left to have that more traditional college experience. And as far as, seeing your friends and seeing your family back home, one of my program leaders told me that if you are homesick, like, that's the best thing, because that means there's something worth missing at home. And home is always going to be there, and that's very important to remember. But the experiences that you're having are once in a lifetime now, and to definitely stay focused on that. For me, I also was super scared to kind of talk to my friends who were going to traditional college about all the things that I was experiencing, because whenever something would happen or something funny would happen and I would think of a friend back home, I was scared because they're not going to understand, or I didn't want to come across as bragging, like, oh, look at me on the beach in Fiji. Meanwhile, while you're in snowy Ohio, like, I was scared to do that. But definitely, the truth of the matter is it's going to show you who your real friends are and who your real support system is, because the people in your life are going to want to hear about all the amazing things that you're doing. And that's definitely something that's hard to realize, but also really good to be able to realize it so soon doing something like this. Some people, that kind of realization of a true support system doesn't come later until life. And for me, I got to, see all of my friends who would check in on me and say, how are you doing? Like, what does it look like? Send me pictures and things like that. And the people who wanted to hear my endless Fiji stories like Madeline. It really is an amazing experience, and don't be afraid to tell people that. It's not bragging. It's you sharing an important part of your life.
I'm always down for a Fiji story.
I'm always down to tell them.
The next question I've got coming through to me is if you could speak, Jade, specifically, you mentioned at the beginning of the call that you changed your idea about majors and what you might want to do with your life. You really gained some clarity there. If you could talk to more about how that was for you, and then also if you know anyone else in your cohort, or did you see that happening as a pattern with other students, that they were changing their mind. And then Keith, I would love to hear about Liv's path. I know we already talked about that she kind of changed paths in terms of which college, but if you could speak to major and clarity on her goals too, if that's changed at all.
I remember a lot of my senior year, I had an absolutely amazing college counselor, and she's who introduced me to Verdo. And she would always tell us, don't put too much stress on your major, because X% of people end up changing it. And it's like more than half, I think. It's very common for people to change their major. But for me, that kind of worried me, because I felt like I needed to know exactly what I wanted to do, just because people tell you that that's going to make everything easier. Once you have this solidified path, you follow that, and then you'll be happy, and then you'll make money, and then this, and then this. And for me, it wasn't about that. It wasn't about doing what was easy. For me, happiness kind of trumps all. And I know that's kind of cheesy, but definitely being on my program, I realized that, because the interactions I was having with the kids and the locals, and kind of just seeing their life, it impacted me so much. I found myself crying happy tears almost every day, just because I felt such a strong connection to the kids and their stories and things like that. And that's kind of what interested me in changing my major over to something where I could be that person who listens to the people who need to be heard. And that's kind of what interested me in social work. And I was able to talk to one of my program leaders who was studying social work at the time. She did pass her test and got her license, so woohoo. But she kind of just told me, there is something exactly for you out there. And that's what I needed to hear, because I felt like I was never going to get there, and that I would need to kind of settle on something and just choose any old major that would make me money or would make most sense to what I was interested in. But it is definitely worth taking that extra step to figuring out what you really love to do, because money and things like that don't matter if you're not happy and you're not loving what you're doing every single day.
So my daughter's definition of success changed dramatically to align with Jade's. And so she thought originally she wanted to go into business. I happen to be a business person, whatever that means. And so that's like, she just was like, that's what I'm going to do. And then she took an international business class and was like, I hate this. I don't want to do this. She took a philosophy class, loved it. And then met like randomly a parent when she got home, social distanced, in a parking lot, who is an international consultant on company culture. So if a corporation wants to move to another country, they hire him to investigate or educate them on what it might be like to be in that country. And she's like, that's what I want to do. I don't know if that's what she wants to do. She doesn't know if that's what she wants to do, but I know that she definitely wants to travel a lot. And the most important thing that she learned is that you get to, unlike high school, when you think about college, you're like, oh, 4 more years of school, whatever. And I kept trying to say, no, you get to take the things that you like. And so as she's looking into her sophomore year and getting to pick classes that she likes, what she learned through Verto is some of the stuff that she does like, that she's drawn towards, and some of the stuff that she's not. And so she still has, some time to certainly figure it out. Jade, to your point, people change their majors a couple of times. I was going to be a teacher. I ended up with an undergraduate in psychology, and then had to go back to business school. Like, everybody changes a million times. And so the only thing that I would, again, go back to is how much she, her definition of success is now happiness, and driving towards that. And she wants to make sure that that's that's the guiding path. I will say, this is back to a comment we made way at the beginning. When she went to Costa Rica in high school, she's like, that's where I want to live. That's what I want to do. And my only comment to her was like, can you please just go visit one other country? Just one other, just one other place. And so she went to China, Thailand, and Laos, and came back and was like, okay, I want to move to Thailand. And I'm like, okay, good. So now, and then she went to Costa Rica. And so the one thing that it did open up for her is that there are lots of amazing places. And so now she's trying to figure out how to create a job that allows her to travel.
And what a great thing to know so early in your college career too, while you're trying to make those choices. And same for Jade, for you to have the opportunity. That's what I think is really special about it being a freshman year or a first year experience, is that you're getting it right out of the gate, where I think a lot of us spend 20 years in the wrong career, or, change majors several times, like Jade said. So it's pretty cool to have that clarity up front. The next question that I've got through for both of you are to talk a little bit more about cohort dynamics. And this is a question we get a lot. So to explain some background, I know everyone heard it in the main session earlier, but when we refer to a cohort, if there is a large group of students going to a semester, no matter how many students are in that semester, the students will individually belong to a cohort of about 25 students in order for us to keep that ratio with instructors and with program leaders very low, so they've got a lot of support there. So with those group of 25 people, I get a lot of questions about what happens if I don't like the people or I don't bond with the people. And so if you would just speak to that, especially Keith, I know you mentioned earlier that Liv sat next to a Dungeons and Dragons chief there who could be very different from her. So I think that's a great thing, but I'd love to hear you both speak a little bit more about what you know about cohort dynamics on those semesters.
I'll start on this one and be kind of brief, just because I wasn't on one, but Liv was on two. She came home. Well, it was interesting. You go through these amazing orientation weeks. And so she was in China, going through orientation, planning out her, kind of the rest of her trip, texting us, letting us know that she was going to stay an extra week in Thailand already. And again, it was one of those, that's great, Liv. Hey, can you give it a month before you decide to stay an extra week and we start changing everything? But she got so close to the people that she was there with over that orientation week. And none of them were anything, that's not true. They were all very much like her. They all had that traveling spirit, but they all came from different places and all over the country. And then she came home and immediately got on a plane and went down to North Carolina and visited one of her best friends from the trip. And they've been up here as well. There's another kid who lives in DC who was vacationing up here that came to visit. So the ties that from the first semester have kind of locked into place. And then the second semester is the same thing. There's these really interesting kids that one's does artwork for some musician. Another guy is the Dungeons and Dragons epic guy who would read them stories and send it out through WeChat or something at night, and they would all listen to them to fall asleep. Just a fascinating group of people. And I would say, my daughter's words, not mine, they're not the people that she probably would have spent time with in high school, just because of whatever lane you're stuck in. But that was the greatest part. That to me was the greatest lesson. And so some of it is you're going to have that traveling spirit to begin with. And so you're going to find that you have more in common with people than you would expect. You guys all found Verto for similar reasons. But then that orientation is huge. And then if there are needs to tweak, that there are people there that know what they're doing to make sure that everybody is getting along.
Definitely agree with everything Keith said. I have met so many amazing people that now is crazy to even think that I probably would have never met them before if it hadn't been for Verdo. You bond so fast, like within the first couple of weeks. Honestly, it's like you've known them all of your high school experience, which was crazy to all of us. We would sit up and just kind of look at each other and kind of be in awe of how close we all were. But with that, you are living with each other 24/7. And so you're going to figure out little things that bother you. One of my roommates, she always had a light on in every room. She would just leave a light on. But now she's one of my best friends ever. But you kind of learn how to work through that, just because that's a life thing. You're not going to get along with everybody, and everybody's not going to get along with you. And that's okay. Some people just don't click in that way. But with Verdo, you kind of learn how to move past that, because you are living with these people. And even some of the people that I wasn't necessarily the closest to on my trips, I think I learned the most from, just because we were different, that we were butting heads sometimes, but I was able to see kind of how they viewed things. And so you're really encouraged to kind of sit down, and if you are having any issues, program leaders are amazing mediators. They have definitely just sat people down, and kind of when you do sit down with people, you realize that normally it's just lack of communication that starts everything. Like, there is no, I don't like you, you don't like me. It's more of just, oh, we just misunderstood each other, and you kind of laugh about it. And so that does happen a lot, but don't have that fear of people not liking you or you not liking people. Give everyone an equal chance, just as much as you would want them to give you a chance to. And you're going to make amazing friends no matter what. So don't let that be a worry.
I think that's always something that I bring up too, as someone who had a traditional first year of college. It seems like people just picked whoever was in their dorm, or you just met people in a class or two and you just decided, okay, I guess these are my friends, but they're completely different bonds from the bonds I see the Verto students making, because you're going through this incredible transformative experience, even beyond just what it would be when you're trying to transition to something new in college, of all things. Anyway, so it's good to hear that those bonds then continue on past the semester. Jade, there's a question in the chat for you, but I think Keith, you can speak to this as well for Liv. Jade, did you go into your first semester knowing you were doing a second semester with Verto, or did you figure that out along the way? And did your parents have any objections to a semester abroad, second semester abroad? And Keith, did Liv know that she was going to do a full academic year?
So for me, I went into my first semester already signed up for a second semester with Verdo. That just kind of came from me knowing me and how I always had that itch to travel and, experience change and things like that. And so I kind of just, in a way, made an assumption that I would want to continue, just because based off of me knowing myself the best, I knew that that was what I wanted to do. And I'm so lucky and fortunate and happy with my decision to do that. Definitely after my first semester, I was hooked, and I was like so excited for the second semester. And in regards to my mom, I'm the baby of my family. I have 3 older brothers, so letting go was definitely hard for Mama Bird. And she also is very concerned safety-wise. I think that's a point that you made up with your parents, is safety is an issue for them. And I think that's with any parent, because that's number one priority for them when it comes to having a child. And that was definitely my mom's concern. My mom is addicted to Google and Googling all of these things. And whenever she would hear an article about Latin America, she would tell me, did you know this happened in the Dominican Republic? It's like, okay, okay, that's good to know. But you kind of can't lead with those assumptions. I feel like a lot of people do, and they come up with these preconceived ideas of what a country is without going there. And for me, I definitely saw that in a place like the Dominican Republic and Latin America. It seemed like there was kind of a lot of unfair bias against the country, just that it wasn't safe and wasn't clean and stuff like that. And I think those biases exist with every country. People who have never been there only can go off of what they hear and what they see. And that is important to know those things, and that way you can prepare yourself. However, you never know. And I think it's definitely the best thing is to give a country, just like people, a fair chance. And I explained that to my mom, and I explained that, me walking down the street, we can't say that that's any less safe than me walking in the street with a whole cohort behind me and my program leaders is any less safe. You can't predict everything. But definitely, I think from a kid's perspective, it is important just to work with your parents and not against them, because you do want their support. And it took a while for me to understand where my mom was coming from and having all of those concerns. It wasn't that she didn't want me to go. She just wanted me to be safe and to feel comfortable. And so we had to work together in order to realize that I was going to be okay, and letting her be there to support me as well.
So Liv knew that she was going to go to 2 semesters. One thing that we haven't talked about, but it is nice, is Virto is significantly more affordable. I see somebody, you have to sign off. Good luck. Virto is significantly more affordable than traditional college as well. And so if you're going to travel for a year compared to what other schools look like that again was wasn't the whole thing, but it certainly was a good part of the decision. The other thing is, as I said before, Liv had already been to Costa Rica and wanted to move there. And so we put that as the second semester out as like a bit of the carrot. And I was excited for her to go to Asia, because that's like an impossible thing to do. You don't get to do that once you start working and all of it. Like, it's just so far away. Same thing for Australia, right? Like, or Fiji. It's so far that you can't do it on a week's vacation. So getting to take some of that time and that experience. And by the way, like I've been through college and then graduate school and then graduate school again. Like, college is plenty long enough. Like, you don't need to be in a hurry to get there. 3 years of traditional college will be plenty. My guess is Liv will take another semester abroad, right? So the idea of a year to me seemed like a no-brainer. And then, so the second part of that is, as a parent, was I concerned? No. I addressed that earlier. I will say grandparents were a little bit like, hey, what you're doing what? You're sending our first grandchild to China? And I was like, yeah, and I can't wait. But no, safety really wasn't a concern for me. And some of that is I travel a fair amount, not always to, exotic places. But certainly to see, I mean, you just get used to the fact that it's never as bad as the media or anybody would lead you to believe. And Virto does a great job of vetting these places. They wouldn't have a program there if it wasn't safe.
Thank you. I hope that helps a little, Sky, too. But the other element is that we do have students who also then decide while they're on program. So that's something that happens frequently too, is while they're out there, they decide they're going to wait another semester or go to a different college or make other changes as well.
I was surprised, actually, sorry, Madeline, how many of Liv's friends in Asia were making the decision to continue while they were there. So it is more, I would say it was more common that people were going for a semester and then chose to stay for a second than new, like Jade and Olivia did.
You're absolutely right. Yeah, and that continues to happen. And I think that's just one of the benefits of having a little bit more time to think about it too, because one of the things that doing a Virto semester provides you is a little bit more time before you have to make these other college choices or decide what the next step is. And with that new life experience and with the travel experience, and now you feel more confident making those decisions, is what we notice often in students. Jade, I had a question come to me in too about how your mom feels now versus then when she was sending you as the baby.
My mom is extremely happy with my decision. She's still asking me for pictures. When I was gone, she was constantly texting me every single day, where's my picture? And she's a big beach fanatic. So in Fiji, I was getting those like 5 times a day. She is, I think, more just in awe of how much I changed so fast. I think I was definitely, admittedly, a little bit stuck in my ways before I left for a Verdo semester. I feel like that's kind of common for a lot of 18-year-olds to feel like I'm an adult now and I know exactly what I'm doing. And that was I really hope my mom's not listening. That was definitely my mentality. And I could not have been more wrong. And I definitely learned how to ask for help, which was something that I struggled with, was asking people for that help. I didn't feel like I needed it, just being a stubborn 18-year-old. And so now I think she's just grateful more than anything that I went through with this, and that I really did take the time and was open-minded enough to get all of that out of my semesters.
That's great. I also have a question that came in that's a really good, interesting question too. And Keith, I'm curious about your perspective on this as the father of a daughter, but especially Jade, when you were traveling, did you feel any gender differences in your two locations, and how did that all work out in terms of being with the cohort and safety and everything else, which is often a concern for a lot of our fathers of daughters as well?
So it was interesting. My daughter is, I think I just factually 5'9" and has blonde hair, and went to Asia, and where she was taller than everybody and looked very different. Like her grandmother again was like, "You're gonna have her color her hair before she goes?" And she talked to some of the people at Berto that had been, and they're like, "No, don't worry about it." And it turned out to not be an issue that was. I mean, it definitely was it definitely was an issue. Like, she definitely stood out, and like people in different parts wanted to get closer to her, but not in a way that ever made her feel uncomfortable in any way, other than the fact that people have different hygiene regimens in different countries. So she never felt unsafe. I was never worried about it. She didn't color her hair. She had a great time. There was none of that in Costa Rica at all. Like, that's like the, knock wood, the safest place on earth. But yeah, there definitely was like this, who are you going to be rooming with? Like, they're the thoughts as a parent with that you do get concerned. But the fact that they always have another roommate of their gender, and that in the homestays have been vetted and had people stay there before, and like there were enough ways that it seemed. In this part, I'm sorry that you're recording this, but and I shouldn't say it, but like, it's safer than a college campus, right? Like for my daughter to go to, and so for her to get out and get some worldly experience and like be on her own and have to walk through a city and understand, and I just thought it was better. Like, it's a safer way to create that confidence, and so I felt comfortable with it, and it turns out it was a very good decision.
Yeah, there was never a day that I felt like my safety was compromised. I think it is really important to acknowledge that, unfortunately, it is just a fact that the world is not a very safe place for women when it does come to gender, and that's extremely sad. Something I'm super passionate about as well. And so going into that, I did know that, and I did kind of know the statistics behind everything and the safety precautions to take. And I think that's extremely important to learn just as a life skill, not necessarily that you're going to need it on Verdo, but I think that it is important for every woman to kind of have that safety in the back of their mind and being aware. Men as well, it's important to be safe. As far as gender norms and things like that, definitely traveling to other cultures, you are going to see differences when it does come to gender. And that was something that kind of took a toll on me, just because it is something that I am very passionate about. And so when I hear, women have to stand in front and men in the back, or vice versa, because of this and this, I think a lot of times my immediate thought was, that's not right. And me thinking that way wasn't right, because every culture is different and you kind of have to respect that, even if you don't agree with it. it's better to understand where those norms come from than to judge them right off the bat and say, oh, this isn't fair. And so, for example, in Fiji, women, they wear sulus a lot of times, which is kind of just a long wrap or skirt. And obviously that was different for a lot of the girls in my cohort coming from places in the US where that's not a norm in a lot of the cultures here. But for in Fiji, it was more just about respect for the body and things like that. And so being able to learn where those differences in gender norms do come from was definitely important for me. And now I'm much more open-minded to it instead of just instantly writing things off. But yeah, in safety regards, you're always going to be safe. You're rooming with somebody who identifies as the same gender as you do or your child does. So there won't be any safety concerns there. And even if something does happen that makes you uncomfortable, the program leaders are absolutely amazing. When I was in Latin America, I had a warrior of a program leader who was from the Dominican Republic, and anytime a guy would catcall, she just taught us, you just keep walking. You don't pay it any mind. You just keep walking and don't let it ruin your day, because I think a lot of times that does happen and a lot of people don't understand the effects of that. But having such a role model, honestly, of somebody like that was so important for me, just to see such a powerful woman like that in a country that definitely does have growing to do when it does come to those gender injustices, for sure.
I see we've got a question in the chat box from someone who recently joined us. Hello there. About could you get into about the relationships and the dynamics? We already talked a little bit about kind of dynamics in the cohort, but maybe you could allude to like any specific relationships that came from beyond the program, and sort of, what does it say there? The learning process together, how you saw each other at the beginning and then at the end. Jade, you'd mentioned earlier that at the beginning you weren't necessarily, it's not that you weren't giving everyone a chance, but a lot of different people are coming together, and that was kind of a growing point for you as well. Could you talk a little bit more about that?
I definitely think it is fair to say that all of the kids in your cohort, you are going to have that one thing in common, that you are curious about the world, because it does take a specific type of person to do something like this. However, what kind of took me by surprise was just how different everybody was. I think I went into it thinking everybody was going to think the same as me. We all were just going to have this passion for life, and it was all going to stem from kind of the same reasons. And that definitely was not the case. Everybody is so different. Even people that live 2 hours away from you just have completely different views on the world. And although that can be hard sometimes when you do have those people who are so different from you, I think it's definitely best to learn from it, because that's the way the world works. When you go on into whatever you're going to do in your future, whether that's more education or you get a job, you have to learn how to adapt with different type of people, because not only is it going to make your work life better, your school life better, but it's going to like make life in general better for you. But it was definitely amazing watching everybody grow, because I think it's hard to kind of see that growth in yourself at first, and you kind of notice it with other people more. And I think pride is just kind of the first word that comes to mind when I think of all of my friends in my cohort, was to watch how much they grew, and how much we learned from each other. You can ask any of the kids in my cohort. Whenever we were in class, I'm kind of a chatterbox, and I have a lot of opinions of the world, and they would call it Jade TED Talks. And but it was amazing because we wrote letters to each other at the end, and everybody mentioned my TED Talks and how much they learned from it. And I was in tears. I was a mess. But you have such unique relationships that I really believe that you can't get anywhere else, because you're all going through such a wide range of emotions in such a short period of time. Because when you're on your semester, 3 months may seem like 3 years some days, and 3 months may seem like 3 days another day. And so going through that quick amount of time in such different experiences every single day that is really going to bond you. And I think family is the best word to describe it, because with family you fight, and with family you laugh, and you have all of these different emotions. But at the end of the day, you all are kind of a team, and that's definitely important to remember.
Anything to add, Keith? Jade's so good.
Yeah, it's tough because that was so beautifully said. Like, I don't want to step on any of that. I can just tell you that from a parent's perspective, going to Parents Weekend and witnessing what Jade just discussed was awesome. You get to see, you hear about these kids, and you hear about the differences and like all of the intricacies and quirks in the different parts of the country, and the rock climber and the Dungeons and Dragons person, and the super green person who's inspiring my daughter to get rid of her, like change over things. And then you go and you watch them actually be that close together. And I know I'm doing this and that doesn't mean anything to you, but what I'm visualizing is like, we went to this restaurant where they did like a cultural dance, and then went outside, and somebody performed, actually my daughter performed a wedding for two of the people that were there. And like, it was just, it was really interesting, because I've seen her around her high school friends, and I've never seen anything like that. It could take a lifetime to get as close as it seems the Verto kids have gotten. And the proof point is that they are still showing up to classes and activities and like game nights from home, which I don't want to do anything other than what Madeline asked me to do after my day of sitting on Zoom. So.
Yeah, I think definitely there, even when we're all suffering from Zoom fatigue now, the fact that they're still doing movie nights and game nights and chatting with each other and staying up until 3 a.m. playing games together, Jade well knows, really speaks to the bonding that happened very quickly. I got a question about some cultural things, and I was wondering if you could maybe, and Keith, from maybe your personal travels as well, talk a little bit more about maybe any cultural surprises that have happened. The one that popped into my head, for example, was when I lived in Argentina, you gave one kiss to everybody. When I lived in Spain, giving one kiss to someone instead of two was a big faux pas, like you thought they were your best friend or something. And I know that Jade and I, we've talked a little bit about some of those things in Fiji with other students too, having to do with like touching the head and kava ceremonies and some of those cultural components. Were there any sort of cultural surprises or tips and tricks from any of your travels?
So I'll start with a really interesting tip. We actually got to move my family to Canada for work, I don't know, 7 or 8 years ago. And there were a few options. I could move to India. There was some interesting options. And when we settled in on Toronto, this guy that was German that had lived all over the world was like, listen, you got to be really careful. And I was like, why? I live in Rochester, New York. I'm moving 2 hours from home. And he's like, the more the language is the same, the more difficult it is to make a cultural shift. Because when you go to Asia, it's different. My daughter Liv looks different than everybody else. So you're aware of the touching on the head or the kissing the cheek or whatever the case might be. But you go to Canada and you're like, oh, they're just like us. They're not. It's a different culture. You go to London, they're different. And so even when you start to take things for granted about your travels, like Chicago, San Francisco, Boston to Texas, it's very, very different. And so it's I guess my tip would be, try to open your eyes and recognize that no matter where you go, there's going to be subtle differences. Be certainly forgiving if people don't line up the way that you do and they queue up in a mess. Like, don't take it as a personal affront. And just recognize that like, that's actually part of the fun of travel, is that spice, and like getting to be a little bit of an expert on like when to say a is like there's this magic that comes from being more malleable and being able to blend in.
Definitely, I think Fiji was one of my most intense and impactful cultural experiences, just because culture is so strongly rooted in Fiji. And for me, once again, back to my butter noodles and chicken nugget, I really do just have a 5-year-old taste buds. Like, that's just me. And so something that is really big in the South Pacific in general, and definitely Fiji, is kava. And it is a traditional drink, and there is a whole ceremony that is performed for it. And you will do that whenever you are welcomed into a place and whenever you are leaving a place. And they do that to kind of welcome you into that community, and that means that you're welcome back whenever. And so you all take a sip of kava together. And I was so excited to do it, and I love learning new cultures, and my mom always honed into me to be as respectful as possible whenever you are in somebody else's home or just in a new country. And so I also was extremely worried of offending people. And so when I had my first sip of kava, which is a plant-based drink, it didn't go down too smoothly. I ended up hating the taste of it, but it was such an important part to their culture that I felt like I had to drink it, and the boys were just chugging down the kava. They would have 8 cups of kava a night. And for me, I couldn't even get one sip, and I felt like I was being extremely disrespectful. And I talked to one of my in-country program leaders, and so he was born and raised in Fiji, and I told him, John, I cannot stand the taste of kava. And he told me, he's like, me either, I don't like it. And my mind was just blown. I was like, I have been drinking this for so long, and some Fijians don't even like it. And so it's definitely okay to say no thank you. And the locals, they know that you're trying. And so when it comes for kisses on the cheek and hands on the head, and what you should and shouldn't do in terms of physical touch and things like that, it's okay to make errors. And that was definitely something I was super worried about, was offending people. But they know that you're trying, and they know that it doesn't come from a bad place when you do make one of those kind of mistakes in a way.
That's great. I think a similar question has come in about language elements too, which is something I know a lot of students and parents are concerned about. How much language should they know before they go in the program? How much do they engage with that? Of course, all the courses are in English, and you're with a cohort all the time that are speaking English, but you still have those opportunities to learn and practice a little bit. So what was that like for you, Jade? And then Keith, did Liv come back with several different language skills with Thai and Chinese and everything else?
So for me, that was also definitely another concern, just with me always wanting to be respectful and being able to connect with people. For Latin America, I took Chinese in high school, so my Spanish was very minimal. I did have the opportunity of going to an international high school though, so I knew kind of survival Spanish just from my friends. But I was super worried that I wouldn't be able to connect with people. That was kind of my biggest concern, was if we don't speak the language, how are we going to become friends, or how am I going to say no thank you to food, and things like that. And I think in my homestay was probably one of my strongest realizations with that. I was just super worried because my homestay mom, she didn't speak English at all. And that's not always going to be the case with homestay parents. For some of them, they may have less English skills than you would like. But I was super worried that we were just going to kind of not be able to bond, and I wasn't going to have a good experience. However, by the end of the week, I was teaching my host mom, English every morning, and she was teaching me Spanish. And so at breakfast, I would just point to things. I would point to the plate, the flowers, the eggs, and say, "Como se dice? How do you say this?" And she would tell me, and then I would tell it to her in English. And she would always wake up super early to make us breakfast. She was the sweetest woman alive, I'm convinced. And so on my last day, I set my alarm for 4:00 in the morning, and I made little flashcards of the words that we were reviewing in English, and I put them all around the house. And she started to tear up, and it was just super sweet. And by the end of the week, she was walking around kind of imitating my Ohio accent, I guess, and just saying, "Oh my gosh," just walking around the house, because that's what I would always say to her. And so I think just being open-minded to learning and trying. I think language especially can be frustrating when you don't understand people and people don't understand you. But definitely sticking with it can be very rewarding.
Yeah, so Liv did not know any foreign languages. She had a foreign language waiver through high school, so she didn't take one foreign language class. And went in and, like, you know, we tried to get her to learn a few words before she went, and that didn't go anywhere, both before she went to Asia and then when she went to Costa Rica. She came back, she knows, like, of course, the currencies well. She knows how to speak about different things. Like, it's pretty interesting how much conversational language she was able to pick up. And if you ask her, she'd say, like, no, I don't know anything. And then you can hear her talking with her friends or kind of referring to things, and it's clear that she picks them up. My middle daughter is fluent in Spanish, which is funny. Because that's why she didn't want to take any, but then she went to Costa Rica and had an immersive Spanish course and came back, and they can, like, kind of go back and forth a little bit. And so I wouldn't say that she was, unfortunately, the Spanish immersion was interrupted because of the coronavirus, and she was pulled home before she was able to kind of live through the full extent of that. But she knew zero going into it. And not only, like, did she not know any, she never took a foreign language class and was able to fully function and operate, and is, I think, you know, certainly more global as a result.
That's great. We have another question here of how much time do Virto students spend in host family settings versus student-based housing? And I will add the first caveat to this, that it depends on the program. So if they're doing South Pacific, Latin America, or Hawaii, those are field semesters where they're on the move. They're living in these lots of different types of housing, whether that be a base house or a more dorm style residence, a hotel, a hostel, or a homestay at different points throughout the semester. If they're doing an on-campus semester in Madrid, Milan, or London, they'll be in their own housing that is set for that entire semester, so they won't be moving around. But Jade and Keith, how much did, on Jade and Liv's semester, did they spend in each location? And maybe you could speak a little bit too, Jade, onto which were your favorite kind of places to stay. I know they each have their unique options, and you talk about the base house as being sort of like the bachelor set, not in dating, but rather in just having all your friends in one house. So what are each of those experiences like?
I think the way that it is, I'll answer the homestay question first. For me personally, with my SOPAC and my Latin America, our homestays were a week long. And also in New Zealand, we were going to do two kind of homestays. We were going to do one in Fiji, which we got to do, and then the other we had planned for a farm stay, and that was going to be a week as well. But due to the virus, that just wasn't deemed safe, so we didn't get to do that. But you also will have opportunities to stay in more indigenous or aboriginal places, which I found really interesting. And so in Costa Rica, we got to stay with an indigenous community, and that was absolutely amazing. It's, once again, unfortunately, indigenous people you don't really hear about a lot, and you don't get to hear their voices and kind of see how they live. And that's due to a lot of, I just learned so much that I could talk about it forever. But that is really unfortunate, because I learned so much through that community, and they were some of the nicest people that I have ever met. And it definitely inspired me to learn more about Aboriginal culture and Indigenous culture. Same with New Zealand. We got to stay for 2 nights at a Maori marae, and that's just more of a Maori culture, which is very big in New Zealand. And so we got to do ceremonies, and we got to sing songs, and we got to cook a traditional meal. And I think that that's kind of one of the best parts when it comes to accommodations with Virto, is it's not experiences that you would get if you just planned a trip with your family or your friends. You are getting these hands-on unique experiences of staying in maraes and staying in indigenous communities that you may not be able to ever experience again, just because it is hard to find, and those relationships are based off of trust, because it is such a valued and vulnerable culture and community that you kind of have to work up a relationship in order to be able to stay in a place like that for 5 days, 2 days, whatever it may be. And so that's special because Verto has been building those relationships and gaining the trust of those people. And you learn to, when you go in there, to have the utmost respect for them. So that way kids in the next cohort are able to have the same experience that you had.
I don't have anything to like. There's nothing to add.
That's the problem when we let Jade go first, Keith.
I'll go first on the next one.
Okay, sorry.
No, it's great. I know Keith mentioned he's going to try to recruit you, but it's a little too late, Keith. We've already tried to make her a program leader, so
We'll see what happens in a few years.
We'll fight for the death there when she graduates. We'll see what happens.
Just take one business class. Just take one business class. Just try it out. Just see what you think.
I'll do it for you, Keith.
Yeah.
She'll be recruited one way or the other. I'm sure there'll be other offers, but just remember us. Remember us when. One of the other questions, and let me pull it up here. I received a question too about communication with families back home. So to start the answer to that question, we do send out a weekly update to families and parents that tell the students what's going on. They have lots of pictures and tell them what's happening in terms of academics and highlights for the semester as well. We are still doing that even though the students are in the next room at home. So hopefully that's not too weird from your end, Keith. But what did you plan for in terms of communication with folks back home while the students were away, and what was the reality?
So we planned for let's make sure we check in every week. Let's do a Sunday, whatever. And then I don't think we ever did that. We caught up every day if necessary. I think I mentioned earlier, we're on Find Your Friends, and all of a sudden she was in this part of China and then over here. And I mean, the Wi-Fi is so good that you could connect as often as you wanted. The nice thing, I mean, Asia was super easy because it was either morning or night, because of the 12-hour difference. And so she had already gone through or was getting ready to go through her, class then experience. So we either caught up about what was going to happen, or more often than not, it was like, this is what I did. And this, she just kind of wrapping things up. So yeah, we got lots of communication from Liv and from Verto with kind of the weekly updates and some of the pictures. She did not, Jade, to your point about pictures of the beach, like she was not the one taking all the pictures, but she did have friends that took lots of pictures. And so we got to see a bunch of those. And then it was interesting in Costa Rica because the time difference wasn't as dramatic. I'd say we communicated less often, but that was probably healthy, right? She was happy and would kind of connect with us every couple days maybe, but it wasn't. I'd been to Costa Rica. Our family had been to Costa Rica before, so it was really cool, the stuff that she was doing. But like zip lining, I didn't need to hear about it. We'd been zip lining before. I wanted to hear about everything she did in Asia. I was like super jealous and still am. And I appreciate the updates about what she's doing in the other room as well.
I think for me, I was definitely convinced that I was not going to text my mother. I told her, don't expect to hear from me. I'm going off the grid. I'm going to live my into the wilds dreams. And that was not the case. I think she was surprised with the amount that I was texting her, just because I was so excited about everything I was doing. I just wanted to tell her. And so sometimes she would be like, are you in school? What are you doing? Why are you texting me? What are you doing? And I think, she did definitely appreciate it. For me, I had a little bit more issues when it did come to Wi-Fi. Like in Fiji, Wi-Fi anywhere just isn't good. But Verto was able to get us Wi-Fi boxes. And so that was really helpful when it came to school and stuff like that. But I also noticed a lot of the times I was not on my phone as much as I am back at home, just because you have no choice but to just be so immersed in whatever you're doing. And so you forget to check your phone sometimes. And I think that's where my mom, since I was texting her every day of the things that I was doing, when I did have those times where I was just surfing or just lost track of time or something, then that's when she went into worry mode because she was so used to hearing from me. But when it comes to Wi-Fi and things like that, there will always be a form of communication if there ever is an emergency. And I think that's always important. And that definitely kept my mom's mind at ease, was when we didn't have Wi-Fi. The program leaders, they always will have data, and they'll always have a way of contacting back home if there is ever an emergency. But yeah, I think it is important to kind of set up those expectations with your child or with your parents on how much, but also not really hold to those expectations so strongly, just because it is easier to say one thing, and then when you're actually experiencing it, something may be different. You may be hearing from them less just because they're just so busy and they're trying to adapt to everything, or you may be hearing from them more just because they're so excited. So having those expectations is good to set, but not to keep them to law, I think, is also important.
We have about 10 more minutes, I think, before we're going to start wrapping up a little bit. But one question that came into me was, what's the orientation process like? And I especially would love to hear what that was like for you in country. I do want to add on the front end as well that for fall and spring students this year, we've continued to improve on those orientations and taking lessons and constantly making adjustments. And so there will definitely be orientation before and in country. Which there already was, but we'll continue to build that out as we find more what specifically students need to know about each location. So those will happen in August. There'll be virtual pre-departure orientations, but then what does that in-country orientation look like on the other end?
I'm going to go first.
Okay.
I don't know. I have no idea. Jade, to you.
Thank you, Keith.
Yeah.
Orientation, for me, I loved it. That's definitely not everybody's experience. Me, I'm just kind of more of a social person. So having those icebreakers, I love a good icebreaker. And you definitely do those kind of cheesy, hi, my name is, this is how many siblings I have. If I was a mermaid, my tail color would be rainbow. And you do things like that. And that definitely will get some eye rolls from some people. But I think a lot of times the more open you are to it, the more fun it is. And it definitely, you do get to know people really well through orientation. Orientation, when you're in your country, is a week long, and you won't have any classes or things like that. And so they let you focus in on getting oriented to your new surrounding and to all of these strangers who you've only seen through a screen. And so it's really good because it also is a very transparent kind of group and energy, whatever you want to call it, safe space is what we said, because right off the bat you go into talking about your fears, and you go into talking about why you did Verdo and what you want to get out of it, and I think kind of diving right into that definitely can be scary. And for me, I personally never really liked talking about my feelings and stuff. I know that's surprising now. Madeline knows now that I am just a crybaby, especially when it comes to my experience with Verdo, in the best way possible. But being able to talk about those things is really important, and being able to set those expectations. And I feel like in a more traditional setting, Keith, if you disagree or agree, but I think that you kind of have to do that more independently when you're kind of transitioning into a more traditional college, and you kind of have to figure that out for yourself. But that first week of your semester with Verdo, you're figuring that out as a team, and you're realizing when you're picking your fears out of a hat and reading them out loud, which is extremely scary and vulnerable, but you realize everybody in the room has the same fears as you. Everybody wrote down, I'm going to be homesick. I'm scared I'm going to lose friends. I'm scared I'm not going to like the food. And you're like, everybody's feeling the same way that I'm feeling. And so you definitely get that through your orientation week.
One question that's come in as well is for record keeping, and this is important too from my stance as I sit trying to gather all the information. Did students keep journals or blogs for their parents or people back home to look at? Or Keith, you mentioned that Liv wasn't so much into taking photos, but what happens to all those photos, and are they kept in journals or blogs? or would you recommend that even if you didn't do it?
So it was like my one big request. My son, who was my second oldest, went on a 60-day canoe trip up through northern Quebec, and like they had to airdrop food in. And my only request to him was that he would take notes every day. And like they capsized with like 3 days left, and like everything was lost. And the one thing that he was super worried about was his journal. And so, and they ended up getting it back. So I was like, Liv, you got to do this. You got to write down just something, one sentence every day. And I've seen it. And it's like the first day she wrote a couple things, and the second day she wrote one thing, and then she didn't. But what was, so I wish that she did. If any students are listening, than this or hear this, please just take a little bit of notes to be able to go back. What has been really interesting is as different photos have come through, she set from other friends, she'll sit us down again and get excited and walk us through all of the different things, and it will spark memories, and she'll talk us through it. So like it's all in there. It just would be nice. And again, it's about her experience, not about mine. I wanted selfishly to be able to live through that. Being able to kind of access all the photos and all the slideshows and everything that people have made and kind of walk through them all. She's there's plenty there. Again, I think that my request was more so that she could relive it all to me. And the fact is, like, the pictures were enough.
I 100% agree with that. I definitely wish I would have journaled more. It's not that you're going to forget the things that you did. It's just good to be able to go back and kind of have that kind of clarity. And you also, when you're writing, you get that feeling. So you can kind of feel that all over again. You get the tone of the excitement of your first kava ceremony. And so you know exactly how you were feeling in that moment. And I think that's the cool part. It also doesn't have to be anything too extensive. Like you don't have to, write 5 pages a night, just because that's not going to be realistic with your new schedule. A lot of kids, they would write down the cities that we went to. And so that way when they saw, Harabacoa, they remembered all the things that we did there. And so having that list of cities does bring those memories back. Also with pictures, I think that's probably the easiest way of keeping memories. And it's something definitely kids love doing now, is taking pictures with their friends, taking pictures of themselves. For me, I always kind of felt super awkward just because I didn't want to look like that tourist that was taking a picture of a statue. But definitely do it. So that way you can go back and you can show your friends, and even just having it for you is super important, because it is such an amazing experience and you're not going to forget it, but it's good to kind of have a visual or be able to read about it and how excited you were.
I'm going to start winding us down here, because you both have done such an excellent job of answering so many questions. And I thank you. I'm so grateful to both of you for offering your experience. Any final advice for those considering or heading to a program in the fall or spring?
I think the last time you asked me that, my advice was to journal, which we just covered that. And I'll try to steal a little bit from Jade, so maybe she'll have less to say. No, I'm just kidding. The going in with an open mind, it was interesting. Like, they said, wear your Verto t-shirt at the airport. And my daughter was like, I'm not wearing that. And it's like, well, how are they going to know who you are? Right. And so it's just like, just do it. Just be in, just say yes, as Jade says, to anything that's safe and you feel good about. So that's the part I'm stealing. But like definitely be excited about it, and recognize that you should be proud of the fact that you're signing up for something like this, and that you're going to have an amazing time.
What was wrong with their t-shirt, Keith? They're cool this year. This is what they look like this year.
Yeah, I don't have a new one, so I don't know what. No, I'm just kidding. There was nothing wrong with the t-shirts. She just didn't. It was like that thing when I told her to do it. She was like, "I'm not doing." Yeah, I
totally get that. What about you, Jade?
Yeah, everything, Keith said. He quoted such an amazing Verto alum just then with the say yes to everything. I 100% agree. And I think allowing yourself to feel everything is very important. Kind of acknowledging that what you're doing is scary and it is exciting and it is totally foreign to you in so many different ways. And just kind of embracing the fear of it all is very important, and not to let that hinder you, because by the end, you don't want to have any regrets of, oh, I should have done this, I should have said that. I think that's kind of one of the scariest parts about life, is having that regret. And so, just doing anything and everything that you're comfortable with is important, and kind of taking this as an opportunity to learn. I think going into it thinking, oh, I'm just going to chill out on the beach all day with my friends is not the best way to go into it, because that you do that a lot. But take the time to learn about the beach, learn about the city that you're in, learn about what you can do to help and things like that, because that's where the uniqueness comes in from. And that's what's going to set you apart from all of your friends, because anybody can sit on a beach with their friends, but not everybody can participate in these cultural ceremonies and meet the only lady chief of Fiji, who is 99 and absolutely stunning, and things like that. So definitely being open-minded, saying yes, and to just take that extra step. And I think for people my age, it just seems like more work. And, with the t-shirt, that's just embarrassing and not cool to have matching t-shirts with everybody, but kind of, it is cool now, Madeline. But definitely having that perspective it's real. It's just the fact of how we think, but going that extra step and willing to be embarrassed and willing to kind of look like that tourist, overall it's gonna enhance your experience. Love the t-shirts.
Wear the t-shirt.
Wear the
Most
t-shirt.
important takeaway: the t-shirt is very cool. Madeline works very hard on it. No. Thank you both again so much. I hope if you're in this session, or in all those that stopped in and left too, I hope everybody got something great out of it. Thank you so much to Keith and Jade for coming on. You really are the dream team. And I'll stay in this session a little bit, but Jade and Keith, thank you again. You're welcome to go on with your day. If anybody else in this session needs some assistance, I'll stay here for a few minutes to help you get to another session, or to answer any final questions that you might have. But thank you so much again, and have a great day.
Thank you. Good luck.
Thank you.
Bye. Like I said, I'll stick around if anybody needs some instructions. I also put in the chat box some of the other links if there was anywhere else that you needed to stop by before we wrap up our day here. Tracy, I don't know if you're still with us. If you do need help getting to another session or navigating, please let me know. Okay, it's just us, Kaylin.